Alright, assalamu alaikum everyone. I'm just going to go ahead and get started today. A little bit short on time. Plus, the verses we have today aren't going to be too long because we're actually finishing up the section of Surah Naml that we were focusing on in the last few weeks, so it's kind of exciting. But yeah, so in this surah, which is Surah Naml, the 27th verse, 27th surah of the Qur'an, we've been kind of examining this one theme using the examples of certain prophets and believers that came before, the Prophet Musa alayhi salam, the Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam, and we've kind of focused on Sulaiman alayhi salam for quite a bit now. We have, of course, the namesake of Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam's story with the ant, Naml, leading to the name of the surah, where he marched his army across a landscape and he heard an ant say to their brethren, "Oh, go back into your home because Suleiman is coming, otherwise he'll come and destroy your houses." Now we have a kingdom a bit bigger than the size of an ant. We have the kingdom that belongs to the Queen of Sheba, and Suleiman alayhi salam has invited her and her henchmen, her followers, whatever you want to call them, to his own place so that way he can provide them the truth of Islam and let them see just exactly who they're dealing with. Because if you remember from before, he sent a message to them saying, "Accept Islam, otherwise I will come to you and I will raise your civilization to the ground." They tried to bribe him with gifts, which he of course refused because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can give him something much better than that. And then when they realized he was serious, that he wasn't a faker just trying to gain wealth, they were like, "Okay, we will come to you and we will pledge fealty to you." So this is what's happening right now. And we left off with Sulaiman alayhi salam asking the jinns if any one of them can bring the Queen of Sheba's throne to him right when they're right on the doorstep of his kingdom. So he can, in this, at least in this tafsir, he can actually see the dust cloud from the caravan of people coming to pledge fealty to him. And then he turns to the jinn and asks, "Oh, can one of you guys bring the chair of the Queen of Sheba, the throne?" We talked about how there was one jinn who boasts about his powerfulness and says, yeah, he could do it before Sulaiman alayhi salam even stands up. But there's another jinn who knows the scripture, in other words, a believer of the Qur'an, one who pledges fealty to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who goes, "I can bring it to you before you even blink an eye." And he doesn't boast. And that's who Sulaiman alayhi salam goes with, because he knows and he embodies the idea that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides blessing. And so he only went with the jinn that knew Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him that power. So now we have the picture laid out for us. The Queen of Sheba has come. So Sulaiman alayhi salam has asked his jinn to bring him the throne, and one of them has done it in an instant.
قال نكروا لها عرشها ننظر أتهتدي أم تكون من الذين لا يهتدون فلما جاءت قيل أهكذا عرشك قالت كأنه هو وأوتينا العلم من قبلها وكنا مسلمين وصدها ما كانت تعبد من دون الله إنها كانت من قوم كافرين قيل لها ادخل الصرح فلما رأته حسبته لجة وكشفت عن ساقيها قال إنه صرح ممرد من قوارير قالت رب إني ظلمت نفسي وأسلمت مع سليمان لله رب العالمين.
Normally, I actually read from one translation, but this time I'm actually not satisfied with any one translation when I'm reading the surah. I think all of them are missing some things, and they all provide their own strength, so I'm actually going to be jumping around from translation this time as I read. In any case, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. He said, "Disguise her throne for her, and we will see whether she'll be guided or be one of those who were never guided." When she arrived, she was asked, "Is this your throne?" She replied, "It looks like it." Suleiman said, "We were given knowledge before her, and we devoted ourselves to God. But she was barred by whatever she used to worship apart from Allah. Indeed, she was of a denying people." She was told, "Enter the tower." And when she saw it, she thought it was a deep pond, and uncovered her shins to wade through. He said, "Indeed, it is a palace whose floor is made smooth with glass." She said, "My Lord, I have wronged myself. I devote myself, with Suleiman, to God, the Lord of the worlds." So very short, only 4 verses today that we really examine. And even within those 4 verses, we have immense wisdom exhibited not only by Suleiman alayhi salam, but by the Queen of Sheba, who was a great disbeliever at that time. So the very beginning, Suleiman alayhi salam turns to his jinn and asks which of them can bring the throne. One of them brings the throne over, sets it down right next to Suleiman alayhi salam, and so he turns to her and he asks, almost in jest, "Hey, doesn't this throne look like your throne in your land?" When he's never been to her land before, he's only sent a messenger to her land. So there's no way Suleiman alayhi salam would even know what her throne would look like if he was just a normal human, and yet he asks her such a brazen question. And so she has no choice but to reply that, yeah, well, yeah, it certainly looks as though it is. Which, imagine in her shoes, she already feels amazed, like this man who's never seen her throne has somehow designed this new throne for her. And perhaps maybe he has a spy in the palace, maybe that's how he knew. Still, why would her throne be there, you know? The more she examines it, the more she just realizes it just doesn't seem to match, right? There's no way a man could build a throne so fast that matches one for one for the throne that she sits on in her land. And I'm certain that the more she examines it, the more she actually takes a look at this throne, she just comes to slowly realize that it's not a exact facsimile of her throne in her land. It is the exact same throne in this land. And soon after, Suleiman alayhi salam confirms this exactly. He goes, "We were given knowledge before her, and we have been Muslims in submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala." Meaning, what is this knowledge? The knowledge of the scripture, of course, the knowledge of Islam. And notice he doesn't even boast about his own power. He can create jinn, not sorry, he can't create jinn, sorry. He can order jinn to do as he wishes. He can order jinn to bring him something and order jinn to create immense structures that the world has never seen before, all at a snap of his fingers if he so willed. But he doesn't associate that with himself at all. He belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he is first and foremost a Muslim. It is said in one of the Hadith, actually, or in one of the tafsir, perhaps both, that when the Queen of Sheba came, to show off his grandeur and to show off how little he actually needed the Queen of Sheba's original gift of gold and land and whatever she had offered before, when he threatened her to take away her kingdom if she didn't convert to Islam. When she arrived, he had a whole menagerie of animals chained up, animals that these individuals had never seen before, and they flanked either side of the procession as they walked forward. And then he had people bring a bunch of gold and jewels and have them put on either side of the walkway leading up to his palace, just to show her that this wealth is nothing to him. He already owns so much, he doesn't need whatever the Queen of Sheba can bring. And one of the tafsirs, I believe, actually says that he put those strange animals like manure on the side of the outside of his palace, just to show them or try to intimidate them, or that one of them says the metaphor was like their gift was almost like the dung of these animals. Like, he doesn't need it. He just casts them outside of the palace that he's in. So, in whatever way you want to twist it, Sulaiman alayhi salam has more power than anyone in the entire world right now. And yet, when this throne is brought to him, he doesn't say, oh, I did it, oh, the jinn did it, or whatever. He says, this is the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because ultimately, he's trying to convince the Queen of Sheba with this form of da'wah. This is a miracle for her, that her throne is exactly right then, it's right there in his land when it should have no right to be, and he uses it to press his advantage. And the Qur'an says something very, very noteworthy here, and it's really a small ayah, which is she was barred from whatever she used to worship apart from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because she was a denying people. What does this verse even mean? It means that had the Queen of Sheba been born in a different time or in a different location and had been brought up on Islam, she would have been someone worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, there was no need for her to even be a disbeliever for however amount of time because she was someone whose capability it was, or she had the capacity to be a true believer. She was just brought up in a time where she did not have access to that early on, and now this is the opportunity that Sulaiman alayhi salam is bringing forth. And actually, this verse can philosophically be used for many different things in Islam. Number one thing is the different schools of thought. For example, the Ash'ari and the Mu'tazilites, they will look at this verse and they'll interpret it differently. The Ash'ari will go, okay, the Queen of Sheba basically was always a believer. Even when she was disbelieving, she was truly a believer because she had the capacity within her to actually believe, and then she outwardly changed to Islam and became a true practicing Muslim at this time. But she was always a believer, and she was always characterized as a believer. We would never call her a kafir because she eventually accepted Islam, so she was always a believer. And their proof is not only a verse like this, but also the verse that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't help anyone, guide anyone to Islam until they've, at least given a little bit of themselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides whom He wills, and whoever closes off their eyes and ears, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only makes them more deaf. So they use verses like that. The Mu'tazilites, on the other hand, will look at this verse and they'll say that, okay, she was a disbeliever before she met Sulaiman alayhi salam, but she recognized the truth of Islam after she met Sulaiman alayhi salam and then became a believer. So we could say she was a kafir before, and then afterwards she was a true believer. So it's a very interesting philosophical position. Like, was the Queen of Sheba always a believer inside? Was she always considered a mu'min by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so we should consider that too? Or was she was considered a kafir at one point and then she changed to become a believer? It's a nice philosophical discussion that we could talk about ages for, but it's not really the time and place. The main goal of this verse is that it was not necessarily the Queen of Sheba's fault that she was practicing an idolatrous or a civilization that didn't worship Allah, they worshiped the sun. It was not her fault that they did that. She was just brought up in that environment, and that's what she was led to believe was the truth. But when Sulaiman alayhi salam comes forth and shows her what's really true, she sets aside her pride and actually accepts Islam. The very last example of this is when she steps into his little throne room, or sorry, his tower, and she sees a floor covered in glass and water beneath that floor. And that to her is miraculous because this kind of architectural design shouldn't even be possible at that time. Let alone wherever Sulaiman is. Sulaiman alayhi salam is likely near Jerusalem, very desert-like, very hard to even find such water in abundance to build, and let alone build some clear glass on top of it, right? Who would even think to make glass at however long ago this was? And because it's so unknown to her, she lifts up her skirt because she thinks she's going to wade through water. And Sulaiman alayhi salam laughs and goes, no, this is a floor, and it's made to look like as if there's water that you're going to wade through. It's actually glass on top. And so when she sees that final nail in the coffin, the final example of Sulaiman alayhi salam's power, in other words, not even his power, the power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that's been granted to Sulaiman alayhi salam, she wholeheartedly accepts Islam. At this point, it may not even matter to her that her kingdom, was threatened before, because now she realizes just how wrong she was to even worship the previous whatever she used to worship before. because whatever she used to worship before, maybe it gave her that kingdom, quote unquote, but it didn't give her anything close to Sulaiman alayhi salam's, and it definitely didn't give her any power close to Sulaiman alayhi salam's. This is the true path, and she's mature enough to realize that, set aside her own pride, and accept that she's not only wronged herself, but she submits with Sulaiman alayhi salam, not to Sulaiman alayhi salam, with Sulaiman alayhi salam, to Allah, the Lord of the worlds. And she, at this point in the story, recognizes the blessings that Sulaiman alayhi salam has been given, which is the theme of this part of the surah. And when she recognizes that, she turns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and becomes a believer. So 4 verses, very short, completes the story of Sulaiman alayhi salam and the Queen of Sheba. But even here, we have profound lessons on setting aside one's pride, knowing when the truth is actually the truth, and accepting it when it is the case, and to remember that in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all else is nil. A kingdom, whatever power they can bring, whatever wealth, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, a Muslim is one who submits to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning they submit everything, and they have full trust in him and his capabilities. And when one does, just as Sulaiman alayhi salam does, and eventually the Queen of Sheba does, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides for the Muslim, gives him things beyond his own imagination, and takes care of him until they die and return to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in which case Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, raises them even higher than they can imagine from before. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us from among those people who are given Jannat al-Firdaus al-A'la, even though we don't deserve it. But I think I'll stop here and open the floor to anyone who has any questions or their own Tadabbur when they were reading these verses.
This is more so just a stupid thought. So I really like DC comics and like their animated shows. And when you were talking about how he basically showed all of this wealth to the Queen of Sheba when she came, because she had tried to like bribe him with stuff to be like, no, 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 you don't want to conquer us. You don't want us to be Muslim. It's fine. I was thinking about Batman and how at one point in the Justice League, they held a summit about funding, and Wonder Woman was just like, oh, well, all of my like stuff is doing really, really well. So if you don't have enough money, Bruce, I can help you out and like give some. And everyone else in the room just looked like, you realize you're talking to like Bruce Wayne, right? He owns everything and everyone. So yeah, that was just where my mind went.
It's true, like Sulaiman alayhi salam was he owned so much more, and sure, like Wonder Woman, aka Queen of Sheba, perhaps, yeah, they have their own riches, they try to bribe him, but can't do anything to Bruce Wayne.
Also, like, just him showing like, hey, I've got all this money, I don't need your money, I'm doing this purely because you should be Muslim, is like, wow.
Yeah, it's a rare form of authenticity that it's really hard to find in our current day and age. But the Muslims back then, like Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, great example of this, right? Sent out messengers to the king of Rome, Persia, and wasn't gonna be phased by whatever they were gonna throw at him. Whenever the Quraysh came to him, he didn't back down for any kind of wealth that they give or any kind of bribe. He stayed true to the path, just like every other prophet before him. So yeah, it's definitely an authentic piece of character that's really hard to find these days.
It's a shame not many people have it these days.
Yeah, that's why it's important for us to remember these surahs and try to become the best people we can, because who else is going to do it, right? We can't look to someone like Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in real life anymore, since he's passed away and returned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have to try to embody his example and the example of prophets and Sahaba that came before us, and try to be the best Muslims as possible. That's all we can do.
You know, there isn't an experience where, or there isn't a point where any other person that walks this earth can't relate to the Prophet. You know, his dad died before he was born. His mom died when he was 6. Maybe was it his uncle Abu Talib? He died before he even accepted Islam. You know, he buried all of his children. You know,
He didn't even
he
have any sons. Like they all died in front of him. I completely agree
yeah,
with you. Like there's so many situations that people these days can relate to the Prophet ﷺ, even though he's perfect, more perfect than any of us. But people use that and they use it as an excuse, right? They're like, oh, I could never be like the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, so I won't even attempt to follow him, which is just a lame excuse, right? You're like, oh, well, I mean, it's true, you'll never reach the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's status, but that doesn't mean that it's okay to not try. Uh, it's a
yeah.
shame, unfortunately. And
There's
yeah,
always
Mario, like
yeah,
it is kind of similar to Yunus alayhi salam's dua, right? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and actually Yunus is a very interesting example because he was actually a prophet, right? That honestly he was unhappy with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed with originally. He was preaching to certain people, they were not listening to him, and so he left his people without the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually punished him for that by having him be swallowed by a whale, which is when Yunus alayhi salam asked, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's complete protection and didn't hold anything back. And first and foremost recognized that he himself was wrong. So certainly, this dua definitely has the vibes of Yunus alayhi salam. Even though the situation were so different, at the end of the day, it's the same kind of idea. You want to turn to repentance in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala if you've done anything wrong, and then completely submit to Him. Because even though you're in the stomach of a whale or you have your entire kingdom, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can give and take however He pleases. So that's a great thought. And sorry, man, I was addressing a Mario, but then I cut you off. You were gonna say something else.
no, you're good. You completely agree with you nonetheless. I'm trying to remember what I was trying to say, but I can't remember at the moment. But I don't think it was that important, so you're fine. Don't worry about it.
I well, if you remember, go ahead and blur it out. I'm still struggling juggling between Discord and OBS and trying to make sure I'm unmuted on both. So sometimes I might start addressing something and realize I'm not unmuted, and so I have to go and unmute and then re-say everything I was saying before. So.
No, you're good. Take your time. It's all right. Ya Allah. It's just past midnight here, and it's like 3 degrees
Gosh.
Celsius outside.
Well, appreciate you coming then.
No, yeah, every time you come on, like, to host the Quran discussions, I'm either at work or I'm asleep. Oh God, yeah, I'm British.
I respect it. That's the true grind.
That's the grind, man. Yeah, man. Good Lord above.
Well, if that's it, I'm gonna go ahead and quit sharing the screen. It was very nice talking about this surah, and inshallah, we're actually going to continue with this surah until we finish it. Just because we've spent so much time already, let's just go ahead and finish what we're discussing. We're about to hit the second part of the surah that starts to talk about the second tone of the surah. So the first tone is all about being thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for what you have, and only then can you truly realize the blessings you have. The second part of the surah, which we're getting to very shortly, is a bit different and has a different message behind it. And so, inshallah, we'll go ahead and expand on what that message is in the future. So, jazakallah khairan to everyone for coming, and assalamu alaikum.